Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Game Plan. If you're new to the platform, this is a place where people can come and get the insight from former collegiate and professional athletes. How did they manage their game plan to make it from the sports to the healthcare field, science and medicine? So, today's special guest is Baba. That's his full name. He told me not to try to pronounce, but call him Baba. So we're about to jump into this edition of Game Plan. I hope you all enjoy it. Baba, the floor is yours.
Cool. Can you all see that? Hold on. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So how's it going, everyone? As Anthony said, my name's Baba Adejuyigbe. Very, very happy to be here with you guys today. It's a privilege and an honor. So thank you for having me, Anthony, and the rest of the Game Plan Network. Really appreciate it. See, it's a nice, small and intimate group, which is great. Feel free to pause and ask questions at any point. Want to make this a conversation and comfortable for everyone. So please feel free to speak in the chat or unmute and jump in if you have a question at any point. And so just wanted to sort of give you guys an idea of who I am a little bit before I kind of jump into my game plan and what I did and everything. And so I'm currently a second year medical student at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. But before that, I worked as the Co-Curricular Program Assistant for the Intergroup Dialogue Project at Cornell University for 1 year. And then before that, I worked as a public health fellow at the Skorton Center for Health Initiatives at Cornell Health for another year. So if you are following, before that, I got my Bachelor's of Science in Human Biology, Health and Society, with minors in Business and Inequality Studies from Cornell as well. And so if you look at the trajectory there, I took 2 gap years before going into medical school in between college. And while I was at Cornell, I was a member of the Varsity Football team. But before that, and if you're wondering why I speak funny, I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. My family's from Nigeria. And so I'll get into all of that. But I just wanted to give you sort of a leaping point or just an idea before I really got into the details of today. And so before I really get into the meat of what I'm going to be saying today, I really wanted to set the current landscape. And really the landscape that I'm setting is as the landscape that I want to speak to is as it pertains to sort of athletes, college athletes, but athletes in general, and medicine, the career in medicine. So becoming a physician. And why I think it's useful to set this landscape is because I think the meat of my talk and a lot of my game plan is structured around how I actually navigated this landscape and how I actually navigated this what was sort of before me, and the things and the skills and tools that I used to do that. And so to get into it, as I was like sitting down trying to think about this talk and do some research, there actually isn't much data out there. There isn't much data from the AAMC, which is the American sort of medical organization. There isn't much data from medical schools, and there isn't much data from the NCAA as well on the number of students that enroll in medical school each year who are also athletes as well. So there's not much there's no places where you can go and sort of look, hey, every year, this is how many student athletes become or apply to medical school and matriculate into medical school. That's not there. But judging off my own experiences in college, and I'll talk about them, and growing up as well, and from the accounts of my other colleagues as well, this number might not be anything to boast about. And so, sorry, spelling error there, but boast about, that's what I meant to say. And what I mean by that is that it's not a big number, probably. If you look at the pool of physicians in America, or if you look at the pool of student athletes in America, and we look at where they end up, they're not moving in heaps and drones into medical school. And a lot of the reason why is because some people think and believe that you cannot be pre-med and be an elite college athlete or be an elite athlete. You cannot be pre-health, interested in a career in health or science, and be elite on the sports field. That's what some people think. And I'm here to try and show you that those people are wrong. I'm here to try and show you that that's possible. Very, very possible as well. And if you think about it as well, athletes are actually desired in medicine. The faculty for the otolaryngology residency program at the Washington University School of Medicine, they conducted a study where they looked at their residents and they looked at their most successful clinicians. They looked at the skills and the qualities that they had, and they found that most of their most successful clinicians had participated in team sports, were like either high school level athletes or college level athletes, elite athletes. And this is not to say that all athletes can go on to become elite physicians, but this is to say that a lot of the skills and tools that are necessary to becoming an elite physician, are also found, or there are opportunities to develop those skills and tools through athletics as well. And I'm sure through, if you've been a member of previous talks before, I'm sure you understand that there's a lot of overlap in qualities between being a physician and being an athlete. And I'll show you some of them as well. And so I was saying before, sports provided an opportunity to develop the skills and opportunities that are paramount, that are absolutely necessary to becoming a great physician. Things like time management, things like teamwork and collaboration, things like leadership, resilience, and being teachable. All these things were found to be, in that study, paramount to becoming, or paramount to what you absolutely needed to have to be an elite physician. These are some of the skills and tools that you learn in athletics: time management, teamwork and collaboration, leadership, resilience, and being teachable. All things that you learn in sports as well. And if you take this further and actually look at the list of core competencies that are necessary to becoming a physician, or what the American Medical Association deems as these things is what we look for in candidates for medical school, or these things are the qualities that make good physicians. You see a lot of overlap again. So you see in the interpersonal space, being service-oriented, having social skills, having cultural competency, teamwork, oral communication, all things that we learned, or that I learned at least, in sports, and that we can learn in sports. If you look at the intrapersonal side, right, being ethical and responsible to yourself and to others, you learn that in team sports, being reliable, being dependable, having a sense of resilience, being adaptable, all things that you learn in team sports. Even things like thinking and reasoning, and even the science, human behavior, observing human behavior, and things like that, you can get out of team sports as well. And so it's interesting because, a lot of people are like, okay, so there's an impasse here. There's a little bit of dissonance here, because we see that there's a lot of overlap between what medical schools are looking for and team sports. but then we see that there's not that many college athletes going into careers of medicine, or messages from people and coaches and things like that, that medicine is too hard to do while doing college sports, when we can see that that's just not the case at all. And so I hope that I've shown you a little bit that I hope I'm beginning to convince you that you can do both, essentially. If anyone has any questions now, would be a great time to ask before I transition into something else. So I'm just going to pause there and ask if anyone has any questions at this point or wants to say anything at this point.
I just want to know what drew you to medicine.
What drew me to medicine? Oh, I'm going to get into that right now. Yeah, I'm going to get into all of that right now. Yeah. So I
have another question before you get into that. Just read another. Thank you for joining us. So you mentioned that there's this dissonance, where you have all of these transferable skills that align with these core competencies.
Yeah.
But time and time again, athletes, especially young Black athletes, are discouraged from pursuing these fields.
Yeah.
By many others. What do you attribute that to?
It's interesting. I think from my personal experience, a lot of it was, so I played football in college, and a lot of it was, would I have enough time to devote to football and to medicine? And it's not easy. And I'm gonna get into a lot of it. It's by no means easy, but it's very, very possible. And I think a lot of it, what it's attributed to is, one, I think people haven't seen it before them. And if people haven't seen it before them, they have no reference points to go off of. And if they have no reference points to go off of, and if everyone before them has been a different major or something else, then they're not going to think that it's possible. And so that's one aspect of it. I think another aspect of it is sometimes when things get hard, people are discouraged to turn away from them. This road is by no means easy at all. But it's definitely doable, and it's definitely hard though. And a lot of the times when people are met with those inflection points, when things get really hard, we lose a lot of people at those points because people aren't being set up with the necessary resources and skills and tools that they need to succeed. And I think that's the third thing, is that people aren't being given what they need to succeed. And so people aren't being told about tutoring. People aren't being told about advising opportunities. People aren't being linked to the appropriate resources. And so we're losing people by the wayside. I think those are like the three things that stand out to me when I think about them, when I think about that question. But hopefully my talk today will give you some ammunition to sort of navigate the existing landscape and give you some skills and tools to rise above some of the challenges. So I hope that answered your question, Reginald.
You did, and as you get into your presentation, I would just like for you to address, where do we need to intervene? Is it on the side of coaches or the pre-health advisors? I know it's a little bit of both, but can talk about your experiences with regard to those two influencers. So thank you for addressing my question.
Will do. And so as I continue, our jobs as athletes who are interested in careers in medicine is actually threefold, three simple things. One, excel in what we're doing currently. So we see that what we're doing overlaps with the core competencies in medicine. And so what we're doing is gearing us towards being a good physician. So being able to do those things well is good. So focusing on excelling on the sports field, focusing on excelling in academia or in the classroom currently as it stands, those doing that's already setting you up to be great and to go far on this road. Number two, go after opportunities that align with your interests and passions. So many times We see people who go after opportunities in order to tick boxes, because people are told you need this, this, and this to be a good medical school candidate. And by all means, you do need those things to be a good medical school candidate, but you also need to be able to speak about those things in a way that shows passion. And that's where the magic happens in medical or in these applications, or in these, as you walk this journey, being able to tell your story in a way that shows that your passion, in a way that your passion shows through, is really the third thing that you have to do. So clearly and passionately communicate who we are through our applications is the third thing. And so not that long of a list of things to do, but in it all, there's some hard work there. So it's not a long list, it's definitely possible, but there's also some hard work to be done as well. And so I just wanted to sort of set the scene, or set that landscape before I sort of got into my story. And as I was thinking and reflecting on what to say during this talk, really what stood out to me was that as I was thinking about my story, certain themes became really, really pertinent to me, and certain, I guess we'll call them themes, became really pertinent to me at different times. And so I'll use those themes to sort of tell my story and show you how I navigated the landscape that I described before. And also in reflecting, what I did realize as well is that these themes not only were pertinent and salient and gave me the ability to tell my story, but they also were my game plan. And so if I think back to when I was applying to medical school, if I think back to the journey that I walked and everything, these themes were things that I sort of wished I knew at the time. If I break it down, these themes were what I was fumbling through as I developed my game plan and as I walked through my journey. And so essentially, without further ado, I guess we can start. We can start with the first theme, and the first theme is find your reason why, and let it drive you. And so I mentioned before that I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was born in America. Funny enough, in Maryland. But I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. I spent all my life there, all the way up until I was for college, essentially, for university. And I was raised in a single parent household. So I was just my mom, myself, and my younger brother. And we didn't really have much growing up at all. And I remember being young and really, really wanting a little brother. And really, really wanting to be able to wrestle and play have a companion, I guess. And when I was four years old, finally my wishes became granted and was given a little brother. But I quickly learned that the lifestyle that the life that I imagined for myself and my younger brother wouldn't quite be what I was picturing in my head. And so my younger brother has sickle cell anemia, which is a condition. It is a congenital condition of the blood, essentially. And what happens is your red blood cells sickle and are prone to sickling, basically changing shape in a way that obstructs the flow of blood through your body, which causes pain and other damage as well. And so a lot of patients with this condition are prone to episodes of pain, and if it's not managed correctly, it can really impact lifestyle. And so my brother has this condition, and growing up he had this condition, and so I remember being often, because my mom was a single parent, I was often left to care for him when he was going through his painful episodes. And I remember really, really wanting to be able to do something for him and not knowing like what to do, not being able to do anything. And I remember being so frustrated because I couldn't do anything to help my brother. I would often have to accompany my brother to his health visits, because he would often have to go to health visits growing up as well. And going to the health visits and things like that, I would often see that I would often look at the hospital around me, and because we didn't have much, we had to go to government hospitals in South Africa, and government-funded hospitals in South Africa aren't really that well-resourced. And so there's a lot of just under-resourced and underprivileged conditions that you see and are exposed to. And I remember also feeling a similar empathy that I felt for my brother, for the people that I saw when I would accompany him on his visits as well. And I realized when I was young, this was beginning to light a flame in me, that you need to become a physician, but you need to have immense amounts of empathy and drive to help people, essentially. As I think back, really, the feelings that I had for my brother, and the feelings that I had for the people at the hospital growing up as well, and the people in my community growing up as well, they were the birthings of empathy. They were my why, essentially. They were essentially, they have become what drive me to do what I do, and what drove me towards medicine, essentially. I remember accompanying my brother on these visits, and his doctor, Dr. Bernie, we remember him well, it's still his doctor today, would make him feel better. I couldn't, but he would. And I remember envying him and being like, wow, like this guy, like looking at him like a superhero, and being like, this guy can make my brother feel like better. I want that. I want to be able to do that for people, I remember thinking. That was my why. And your why can grow. And if you don't know your why now, that's okay. That's totally okay. Your why can grow to encompass different things. And so it started with my brother, but it became empathy for the people in my community. It became empathy for the people that I was seeing in the hospital. And now it becomes empathy for people who are living in limited resource conditions anywhere, globally, locally, etc. And so it becomes your why can grow and expand and everything. But it's important to find that why, because that why is what you'll lean on in difficult times. That why is what you'll lean on, what you'll revert to when the road gets tough. You'll revert to, why am I doing this? And you'll remember, and that's what will drive you, and will see you through those moments. So that's the first thing. Find your reason why and let it drive you. And the second thing is learn the value of hard work early. Be accustomed to working hard, I think is the second theme. I think all through my life, hard work has been drilled into me. From a young age, my mom growing up was always like, be accustomed to working hard. Like this is all we have. Like our hard work is all we have. Like we don't have much, but our hard work is all we have, and our hard work is enough to bring us out of the circumstances that we're currently in. And so I remember that was drilled to me into me from the get-go. And so really, when I was young, growing up, everything I did, I tried to do to the best of my ability. I worked extremely hard at. I was drawn to sports and academia at a very young age. So when I was young, growing up, I was a swimmer. I played Waterpolo as well. I played soccer and I played rugby. So I was a junior national representative for South Africa in swimming and in Waterpolo. and I played soccer and rugby at the state level. So I played sport at quite high levels, and all of that was attributed. All of that took hard work, and all of that was from the messaging that I got from my mom, and from a desire to really see myself or work myself out of the circumstances that I was currently in. In the same way, I took that messaging to the classroom as well. And so I treated the classroom very, very similarly to how I treated competing on the sports field. I remember thinking of tests just like games. And I remember thinking of my preparation for tests like games, and playing games with myself while I studied and things like that. And drawing sort of those analogies between sports and academics really helped me do well in the classroom, and it made the work a little bit more interesting as well. And so I would see the classroom as an extension of the sports field, and would compete in there as well, and would try hard in there as well. It wasn't always pretty. It's never always pretty. It's never always linear. Like, your hard work doesn't always result in A's, or doesn't always result in starts on the sports field. But that hard work is never in vain. If anything, it makes you a better person. It allows you to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And more importantly, it gives you and equips you with a sense of resiliency that you'll definitely need and use and be able to apply in the future as well. So if anything, at the very least, that's what it gives you. And so essentially, I made sure to work hard on the sports field growing up, and I was a national representative in those sports mentioned. And then by the time I finished high school as well, I had I was in the top 3 academic performers in my class, and so I was doing well academically and on the sports field as well, and made sure to carry these messages of hard work with me to Cornell. So I left South Africa to go to Cornell when I was 18. And I did not leave on a football scholarship. I got into Cornell and then walked onto the football team. And why I did that was because I was really interested in, I needed balance. For me, having sports in my life was a way of balancing the academics, and I needed it for me. And so I really was interested in playing sports. And because I was competitive, I was interested in playing them at the highest of levels. And so really wanted to do a varsity sport. Before I left for Cornell, I was already playing rugby semi-professionally. And so it was like, I wanted to go D1 and I wanted to try and do this varsity football thing. Albeit I had never played football before in my life. So it was very interesting what I was trying to do. And in hindsight, thinking back, it was a little bit crazy, and naive, but I'm glad I did it, and definitely have no regrets. But I had to work hard at football too. I didn't play for 3 years, and you can get jaded when you don't play for that long, especially when you're a big time athlete before. And so it definitely had to work hard at that as well. I got my butt kicked for my first 4 semesters, for my first 2 years at Cornell. I was not doing well academically. It wasn't because I wasn't trying or anything. It was because I didn't know how to do well academically at college. And once I figured that out, and once I learned how to do well academically, I managed to graduate Cornell pretty well, and got academic awards when I was graduating at Cornell, and got academic scholarships as well. And so also to say, with some hard work, you can turn even the most negative of circumstances around and make them positives as well. And so, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say for that theme. So for that theme, learn the value of hard work early. My third theme really revolves around exploring your curiosities. And what I mean here, this one's near and dear to my heart, but like, if you're interested in something, do it to the best of your ability. Pursue it, try and do it, and give it your all. Because what I found is that curiosities lead to passions, and passions lead to careers, essentially. So explore what you're curious about. Even if those curiosities fall outside of sports, or outside of your traditional academic route. And so a huge part of my maturing and my growing as a person was due to like my having a sense of curiosity. I would always ask why. Like I would always ask why. Why? Like, why did my brother feel pain? Like, why? And at first, these questions were like pretty simple and trivial, but as I grew older, these questions began to go deeper. So I would ask things like, why are the lines only long at my hospital, whereas in other hospitals, the lines aren't as long? Why is everyone who is struggling in my hospital Black, but everyone, when I go to other hospitals and see people who aren't struggling, they're not Black. And so questions like that. And these questions caused me to look for answers. And in looking for these answers, I discovered passions and interests. That's exactly how I stumbled across my research that I did in college. Is I was asking the question, is there a way to give technological care to deliver health tech to people who live in limited resource settings? And so my research that I did during my undergrad was all in developing medical diagnostic devices for limited resource settings, essentially. And so I'm looking at innovative ways to develop medical technology for when maybe there isn't electricity or maybe there isn't water. How can we still get around health issues with tech, essentially? And that I found was a passion, and that was all from birth from a curiosity. At the end of my sophomore year in college, I had no idea how to apply to medical school. Like college is a place where no one kind of asks you if you have all your ducks in a row or anything like that. And so I was just cruising through college. Was my second year in America. I didn't really know anything, didn't really know up from down, let alone how to apply to medical school. But I knew my classmates were already thinking of applying already. And I was already feeling, and it felt very overwhelming at the time. But I had a sense of curiosity. I was like, how do you apply to medical school? Like, and why don't I know this? And then what I realized is there was a gap, and very similar to this organization, I founded an organization in college called the Cornell Athletic Pre-Health Society, basically, that was for college athletes who were interested in careers in healthcare. Basically what we did was very, very similar to this. We had speakers come in, talk to us. We had admissions committees come in and talk to us and tell us what med schools were interested in and things like that. And all of that was birthed out of me being curious enough to ask, how do you apply to medical school? Why don't I know? The reason why I didn't know is because a lot of the times, all these meetings that were happening in where you'd get this information on applying to medical school and things like that, they would happen during my practice times. So I would never be able to go because I would always be practicing. So in seeing that there was a gap, I didn't sort of give up and feel helpless. I was like, how can I fill this gap instead? That all came from a sense of curiosity. And it led to something great. And it was being able to talk about that was amazing during my applications for medical school as well. So number 3, explore your curiosities. That's a big one. And then lastly, this is my last one. Remember to be kind to yourself and be in a constant state of reflection. I think this one's big, and this one's near and dear to me as well, because as athletes, I think a lot of the time we don't remember to be kind to ourselves. We don't remember that it's necessary, that, it's okay if we fail sometimes. And I think that comes from being hyper competitive and always wanting to win. But in life, it's not possible to always win all the time. And sometimes you'll inevitably be faced with losses. In those times of losses, it's important that we are kind to ourselves, that we remember to be kind to ourselves. And it's important to always be in a state of self-reflection. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I learning from what I'm doing? And how has what I'm doing helped me become better? Being in that kind of state of reflection, of self-reflection is great, helps a lot in this journey. Because I think it's important to remember that it's long. This road is long, it's tough, it's not easy, and it's important to be kind to ourselves. I remember, as I said, in college, I didn't step on the field for 3 years, on the football field for 3 years. It was hugely frustrating to see, my class, my colleagues, my teammates, people who were younger than me play ahead of me and things like that. But in those moments, I had to remember to be kind to myself. Remember that, hey, this is the first time I'm playing football before ever. Combining those other themes that I was working hard at it. I was able to play all throughout my junior and senior year. And so at both middle linebacker and on special teams as well. So it's just a testament to hard work. And I think remembering to be kind to myself was pivotal in being able to get through those difficult moments as well. I had to take the MCAT twice as well. I didn't take the MCAT once. I had to take it twice. And the reason for that was I didn't feel that I did well enough the first time. And the reason for that was because I was coming off for 4 years of college football and working crazily academically. And in my senior spring, thought I would be okay to take the MCAT, and didn't realize I was actually quite burnt out. And so I didn't study as effectively as I could during that time, and didn't do well in the test. And it was all because I wasn't remembering to be kind to myself. But in that moment, there was an opportunity to be kind to myself again. And the one gap year that I planned on taking turned into 2 gap years, so I could take the MCAT again. And the second gap year that I took, I worked and had an amazing, fulfilling opportunity and learned lessons and things that I still use today as I become and develop into a physician. And so then that year was absolutely necessary for me. And it was something that I didn't want to take at first, but it was something that I think I needed for sure. And so, in those moments where it's tough and where it's hard, remember to be kind to yourself. That's important. And so just to recap what I said, again, find your reason why, let it drive you, learn the value of hard work early, explore your curiosities, and remember to be kind to yourself. And if you remember to do these things, I think that they'll put, these are not the only tools, or this is not the only game plan, but I think that these are some tools and some skills, and they're certainly what worked for me. And I think if you remember to do these things, you certainly can begin to lead to success for sure. So thank you for that. I've been speaking for a while, and I want to open up the floor to questions.
I have a question. A lot of times people talk about the gap year. How important is a gap year? And you said you took 2. So how important is the gap year? And what's the best way to utilize a gap year?
Yeah, so the gap year was hugely important for me because one, I found as a college athlete who was playing a D1 program, there was a lot of my time was given to sports during college, essentially. And so I didn't really have time to do the things that were necessary for med school applications. So like having things like clinical skills and having clinical exposures. I didn't have the opportunity to do that in college because I was always playing sport, and during the summers I was staying on campus to train, essentially, because I had the gap to close. My teammates have been playing football since they were 9, and I only started when I was like 18. So I had like a lot of learning to do. So a gap year was necessary for me to fill in those gaps. A gap year was necessary for me to take the MCAT, for instance, because that was something that I was unable to do while in college still. But more importantly, I think a gap year was a time for me to really pause and reflect on the 4 years that I had in college that seemed like a whirlwind at the time, and really digest them and really think about the effects that they had on me, and then think about how I wanted to take my next steps next, but in an effective and calculated way. The gap years gave me opportunities to do that, and also gave me opportunities to get some pretty cool experiences as well. And so which leads me to how would you use the gap year? So a lot of people think it's necessary to use the gap year in doing health-oriented things. That's one way you could look at it. And maybe if you think your application is really lacking from like a clinical side of things, then maybe it would be a good idea to use your gap year in that way. But I would say a good use of time for the gap year would be doing something that you're passionate about, and doing something that you've always wanted to do, just because you won't find these opportunities, or you won't ever find an opportunity. You won't ever have an opportunity to do that again once you, or you may find it very difficult to do that again. But also, a good candidate isn't a candidate who has ticked all the boxes. A good candidate is a candidate who can passionately talk about their experiences. Talk about the experiences that they've had, and communicate who they are in a passionate way, clearly on paper, essentially.
Thank you. As Marcia says in the chat, gap year is now referred to as a year of reflection. I see Nicholas has his hand up. Nicholas, can you please come off mute and ask your question?
I just wanted you to like take us through like a day during the football season and how that went for you, like with classes and everything.
Sure. So essentially, and this is something I should have highlighted as well. Like, college, thinking back, like it took a lot of sacrifices as well. So there were things that I couldn't do that my friends maybe were doing. There were parties that like my friends would be able to go to that I couldn't go to because I had to sort of study for science, for an organic chemistry test, that they had no idea what that was because they were majoring in other things, kind of thing. And so there was a bit of sacrifice there. And my day-to-day was sort of, I would wake up early, have lift. So essentially I would have probably a lift to go to by like 5:45 a.m. And so I'd probably wake up in those days at like 5:15 and then go to lift, make it to lift by 5:45. That lift would be until 6:45, 7, around there. After the lift, we'd have meetings. So like a film session or a meeting session, that would be an hour essentially, or so. And so we'd have lift meetings, and then around 9, 8, 9, I'd be ready for classes essentially, and would have classes for the day, and would go to classes depending on my schedule. Would have classes running maybe from like 10 to 12 that day, or like have one at 10, another one at like 1, and another one at like 2, something like that. But like in any given day, there weren't more than like maybe 3 or 4 classes that I had. And I would do my classes, and then after that would have practice at 4:30, and would practice from 4:30 to essentially 4:30 to around 7:30 for football. And then after that would go on and do some homework, and then sleep, and then do it all again. Yeah, so that was basically my schedule essentially. And then there were gaps throughout the day, of course, to do work as well. And there are interesting ways you could use your time as well. But in college, that was pretty much how I was living.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? If not, I will throw another question out there. Baba, how did your participation in sports aid in your pursuit towards your medical profession? What are those attributes that you learned in team sports or youth sports that translated to your path in healthcare?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, it was one, the teamwork aspect, 2, have a sense of resiliency and knowing what to do in hard and difficult times. And then 3 was time management, I think, was another huge one as well. And to be honest, there are countless, so many. The list could, like, as I think back, the list expands and expands. Also to say, the overlap that I spoke about early on in my talk is very real. There were things that I learned from swimming, like hard work and the value of repetition and things like that, like doing laps and things like that. The value that had in pursuing things like organic chemistry when there was a difficult problem that I couldn't do. I would remember the laps that I would do, and the fact that if I just kept at it, I would experience a breakthrough, like that kind of thing. Drawing those kinds of parallels, that happened all the time throughout college, and continues to happen even now in medical school. Thinking about the huddles that we do before when we discuss patients, very similar to the huddles that we would do on defense before going out and do a play, and so things like that. There's so many parallels, and for me, it's helpful to think about my life through sports, because sports is kind of all I know. And so for me, it's helpful to even think about medicine through sports. And I'm interested in surgery, and so as I take steps and basically walk the path of surgery, I even think of surgery like competing in sports, and the surgical problem being like a team that you're facing up against, and being able to plan and prep for the surgical procedure as planning and prepping for a game and things like that as well.
Thank you very much. I see Dr. Miller has his hand up.
Yes, you actually answered one of my questions. It was going to be you're in MS2. I was going to ask you what was your interest in medicine? So you said surgery. Any particular area of surgery?
Yes. So I'm interested in orthopedics, and that's the sports side coming through and shining through. But I'm also interested in neurosurgery as well. And then I'm really interested in global health as well. And why I say global health is, I think within any specialty you do, you can get a way for you to do some global health work. But I think that those are the three things that stand out to me right now.
So have you been able to connect with any other athletes that are in your medical school class? And if so, have you guys commiserate around your sports careers?
Yeah, so there's one other athlete in my class. She was a hockey player over at Yale. She was an ice hockey player. And we often commiserate on our sports and talk about the fact that, like, a lot of the times in medical school, when our classmates are like complaining about things and things like that, a lot of the times I take solace in her, because she's like, people are just complaining about nothing. Like, this is not even like the slightest inconvenience. So things that inconvenience other classmates, like, barely ever inconvenience us, and we always laugh and joke about it. And so, yeah, and that way we connect as well. But then in my class, there are a whole bunch of people who are who maybe didn't play in college, but who maybe played a bit of sports in high school, and who still continue to do some extracurricular activities as well.
Great. A lot of the medical students don't like to say this, but they think it sounds bad. But many of them say that compared to what they had to deal with before medical school, even though medical school was challenging, in some ways medical school was easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the road. I mean, the road is long to get there. And medical schools is by no means, and has by no means been easy at all. But I guess because the road is so long, you learn so many skills and tools along the way that makes it feel lighter, makes the load feel lighter when you get there finally. So as I stand in medical school and deal with and roll with the punches, I'm a product of like 20 years of experiences and things like that that have allowed me to sort of sharpen those skills and tools to be able to do that.
And that's important for the young people on the call to hear, who don't understand, the benefits of that journey, and who can sometimes get discouraged. It was good for them to hear that from you.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, and good luck. And if you do decide to go down the orthopedic path, you should stay in touch with us. We should talk to us now. We have a program with 100 Black men. It's NFL Sports Scholars Program.
Oh, wow.
So we particularly look for young men of color interested in sports medicine as a career. So we should talk.
Yeah, would definitely love to talk more. Would love to talk more.
And one of the program sponsors is actually it's the NFL, so it's actually in LA. So we definitely need to talk about that.
Yeah,
with
definitely. I'm right there.
All right. Anthony, back to you.
Okay, so the one question that I would like to have asked is, I know that there might be some parents on the call. How important is it to have support from family or from a mentor or a teacher or even a coach?
Yeah, that's huge. Wow. I mean, I am where I am today because of support. My mom didn't always have the answers, but she definitely had support, and she supported me enough to give me the energy to go look for the answers when she didn't have them, kind of thing. So support is huge. Like in Africa, we have a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And so being support oriented and having a network around me is something that I've always relied on for as long as I can remember. And that support was huge as I walked the path. Didn't always have to be support in knowing the answers, because I think a lot of the times we don't know them. But it could be something small, but just words of encouragement and things like that is huge, because so you can get slapped around a little bit, and that support comes very much in handy when that does happen.
So along that line, though, so talk to some of the students about this. Everything is, worked out for you. This is great, but they need to understand how to deal with adversity as well. So when you have a coach, I can't imagine every coach that you encountered said, "Yeah, you're going to medical school. Great for you."
Yeah. So what do you do when you're dealing with adversity? Well, I think that there's it's interesting, because I think the adversity that you're talking about is adversity when you butt heads with a coach who may not be understanding of your commitments outside of sports. And that happened, certainly happened a lot of the time in my walk. And what I found really, really good to do, what I found really helpful was one, having an open and honest conversation with that coach. I cultivated respect between all my coaches, and so I could always have an open and honest conversation with my coach. Now, it may not have always been at the time that I'd like to. So, at the time of the conversation, perhaps, as emotions are running high, I may not be able to have that conversation then, but I could always go back and be like, hey, this is where I was actually coming from, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to clearly explain to your coach why it is that you need to do the things that you need to do and why it's important to you. And then hearing your coach out and being able to understand why their demands are important to them, of you. And then being able to be like, well, we have two sides here. I need to get this done. You need this from me. How can we create a scenario where we can get both of these things done to the best of our abilities? And sometimes that came with me having to create certain agreements with my coaches. So I would have things where, like, for instance, I would have tutoring to go to every Wednesday. But I knew that I had tutoring to go to every Wednesday at 7 p.m. But practice ended at 7 p.m. on the dot. And so I knew I'd be late. If I didn't leave practice early, I'd be late to tutoring. Well, at the beginning of the season, I explained this to my coach and explained why I needed the tutoring, et cetera, et cetera. And my coach allowed me to then leave practice early on Wednesdays so that I could make it to tutoring. But I had friends, and this is an example of something that you shouldn't do. I had friends who were in similar boats, but instead of coming to the coach kind of early on, knowing their schedule and coming to the coaches early on, they would kind of blindside the coach with it. And I think that that's when you sort of run into trouble, is when the coach feels blindsided. Like, oh, you didn't, wait a minute, you're telling me at 6 p.m. that you need to leave here in 30 minutes on the day of tutoring. Like, I wish you had told me a few hours before. I wish you had told me a day before. I wish you had told me. So being organized from your perspective, I think, is helpful as well in navigating those kinds of conflicts as well.
Thank you for that answer. Does anybody have any final questions? We're approaching 7:15. Don't want to keep the speakers or the students too long. Going once, Going twice. Okay, so no more questions. So I want to thank you, Baba, for participating. I truly appreciate it. And this will go up as soon as possible. Please continue to keep in touch with me on any future endeavors and stuff like that. Baba put his email inside the chat, so feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions. And thank you all for attending Game Plan again. I look forward to seeing you in March. We're going to skip February because our FOD mentoring program has a financial literacy series, but we definitely will send that invitation out to Game Plan and Swag networks as well. We hope that you're able to join our weekly financial series in February. So with that being said, thank you all, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you again, Baba. Take care, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Cheers.
Excellent.
And thank you for listening to me. Very much appreciate it. If you want, please feel free to send me an email about anything. If you want to talk about like your application specifically or your sort of circumstances specifically, please feel free to do that as well. We can find some time to do that as well, or anything. So yeah, I'm hoping to hear from you as well, Dr. Miller as well. So, all right.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
again.